I'm Paddy Tillett of the City Club of Portland. We're delighted to welcome you to the second of 4 Friday forums in which we imagine a renewed Portland. Each of our monthly programs features a different aspect of revitalizing our city. Today we're featuring guests from Denver and San Francisco who are facing some of the same problems that challenge us in renewing downtown Portland. City Club of Portland is proud to host non-partisan public forums, debates and research to help Portlanders make informed decisions on elections and public policy. City Club is committed to providing a space for civil dialogue that enhances respectful discussion and positive change. Unlike most clubs, members of City Club do most of the work themselves. It's members who provide ideas, lead conversations, do research, and plan programs addressing issues important to our community. To support our mission and to participate in City Club's work, become a member today. Visit pdxcityclub.org/membership and let us know how you'd like to engage. If you join today, you can take $40 off your annual membership dues using discount code NEW40, N-E-W in capitals 40, thanks to the generosity of one of our board members. We offer special thanks to G.B. Arrington, Jonathan Conkle, and members of the City Club's Built Environment Issue Committee for developing today's program. Thanks also to Kayla Kennett, City Club's Communications Director, and Sam Metz, the Program Committee Chair, for their hard work in bringing all the details together. We also want to thank our sponsors, AARP Oregon, Neil Kelly Company, and Fight Against Sex Trafficking for their generous support. I'm expecting thunderous applause at this moment, please. Thank you very much. Our next 2 programs will continue today's discussion of Portland's future. Both programs will be at noon here at University Place on the first Fridays of May and June. Each panel will focus on a different aspect of how to create a better Portland, beginning with downtown. Please visit your City Club website, pdxcityclub.org/events, to register and find out more information. So for today's program, which means you have to turn your cell phones off at this point, please. In years past, Portland became accustomed to praise for our city and for hosting visitors who eagerly asked what made us so successful. However, Portland has recently been assailed by a cascade of immediate and long-term problems. To recover our once distinguished reputation, Portland needs to determine what it could become. We need a compelling vision of Portland in 2050, a place that's all it could be, and ensure that our policies and investments contribute towards that vision. Today, we shall benefit from the experience of 2 other cities facing similar problems to ours, Denver and San Francisco. We're delighted to welcome Andrew Iltis, who is Senior Vice President of Downtown Denver Partnership, and Sarah Dennis Phillips, Executive Director of Economic and Workshop Development for the City and County of San Francisco. Introducing them and moderating this discussion is the City Club's own Steve Dotterer, planner for the city, who for 20 years was the chief transportation planner for the City of Portland. Steve is past president of Portland's Architectural Heritage Center and served as principal planner in Portland's Planning Bureau. We're fortunate to have two additional panelists for this forum, one of whom is announcing herself. Two panelists, Olivia Clark, one of the 3 Portland City Councillors for District 4, representing West Portland, including the downtown area. Olivia is chair of the City Council's Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and she'll have the privilege of asking the first question of our guests. Also with us is Steve Novak, who, as you know, is also a member of a new city council, represent the north of Portland. And he is known for having incisive questions, so he will put us all to the test. Now I ask everyone to welcome our panelists and guests, Sarah, Steve, and Olivia. And Steve, over to you.
Okay. Thanks, Patty, and thanks to the City Club for sponsoring this program, and thanks to all of you for attending today. I hope it'll be an educational exercise. As Patty said, we have two speakers, Sarah Dennis Phillips. Sarah began her career in downtown revitalization, working to build thriving downtowns in several Northern California cities. Beginning in 2005, she started working for the city of San Francisco, first in the planning department, and later as the deputy director of development in the Office of Economic and Workforce Development. Later, she moved into the private sector, working for Tishman Speyer's San Francisco office. And more recently, she's returned to San Francisco as the director. Our second speaker will be Andrew Iltis. He's the Senior Vice President of Planning and Community Impact at the Downtown Denver Partnership. Andrew leads the urban planning, design, research, and mobility programs for the partnership. And he directs collaborative planning activities that invigorate the downtown core and foster neighborhood vitality. He's been with the partnership for 6 years, and before that he worked as a consultant in the private sector, consulting with local, state, and federal agencies on long-range planning, asset management, urban design, and community engagement. So a lot of experience for us to learn from today. His graduate and undergraduate work was at the University of Colorado in the fields of GIS, urban design, urban and regional planning. To set the stage for this conversation, as Patty mentioned, the goal today is to learn from other cities. And the reason we're talking about these two cities and a little bit about ourselves is that, as Patty mentioned, we used to have a very positive reputation and that our downtown was a very important part, both of our definition for local residents and an understanding from outsiders of who we are. And all three cities today suffer from shared problems: high office and retail vacancy rates, homelessness, crime, and a newly negative national reputation, which is a part of our problem. To test that out, I asked AI to describe our three downtowns independently. All three of them, in the paragraph I got back was, this city has the highest office vacancy rate of any city in the United States. So it kind of tells you where we are. It is true that all three of us have office vacancy rates of about a third in the downtown core right now. But it is important to recognize that there's significant differences in scale. San Francisco has almost 90 million square feet of office space in its downtown core area. Denver has about half that, 45 million square feet of office space. Portland, if you define ourselves very narrow, as the narrowest version of downtown, has about 22 million square feet. So we're learning from places that are much different in scale. We have a kind of a reputation here in Portland of borrowing ideas from other places, and we're going to learn and try to take advantage of that today. What I'll say, though, is we need to keep in mind that the scales are different, the setting is different, and our response may be to borrow something and change it. And let me use a couple of examples from our past about how we've done that. When the city started a downtown plan in 1972, the whole council went to Minneapolis to look at their new skyway system. They came back and said, it's not that cold here in the winter, and it's not that humid in the summer, and besides, we'd really like to have more life on the street, and on the sidewalks. That's going to be our focus. We're not going to do a skybridge system. We did borrow things from them, however, and from other cities. Both Minneapolis and Denver, by that time, had built transit malls. And we decided that we would build a transit mall, but we changed the idea. For Portland, it became part of a spine of access to the downtown that would support new office development and give us another reason not to build more urban freeways. So we took the idea and used it in different ways. And that is, I think, the lesson that we want to gain from today is to take the ideas from other places and figure out how to use them. Now, in the last 30 years, since 72, the region has done a lot of planning of this kind, where you focus on putting together a plan that fits us. You focus on doing a plan that integrates activities from elsewhere, and you focus on implementing that plan so that you make it a reality. And we've done that with our urban growth boundaries, we've done it with our green spaces, we've done it with the Pearl District. And that's why people have come to visit us in the past. Today is an opportunity to begin that conversation again and that exchange, in this case with San Francisco and Denver, but we want to learn from other places, modify what they do, make it apply to us in a useful way. So I think that's enough as a start. Sarah, would you like to chime in?
Sure. Steve, thank you very much. City Club, thank you so much for joining us, and really glad to have the counselors joining us today. I thought, just based on our conversation before, that what might be helpful for this group was to give a little bit of our story, both the impacts hitting San Francisco and how we're addressing them. So just for context setting, as Steve mentioned, San Francisco is only 49 square miles, 7 by 7, but we are a relatively dense city, and we certainly punch far above our land mass. What's interesting is our downtown neighborhoods, and there's 5 of them. We have our financial district of the downtown. We have a neighborhood we call the East Cut. We have Union Square, which is our historic shopping area. We have Yerba Buena, which is our convention and museum district, and we have Mid-Market. Those downtown neighborhoods are 4% of San Francisco's landmass, less than 2 square miles of that almost 49 square feet. So it's not a whole lot of area, but it is an engine. It is the engine that has driven our economy and frankly driven, I think, what most of you know about San Francisco, at least what you hear in the media. Our GDP is relatively large. You know, we put out $250 billion in GDP. That's about a quarter of the total economic impact of economic output in the Bay Area. We secure, in terms of venture capital, more than 25% of the almost $200 billion that's contributed to U.S. startups across the country. So we're achieving a lot there. And I think, as Steve already mentioned, we've got almost 90 million square feet of commercial office space, one of the densest and most walkable downtowns in the United States. Unsurprisingly, the changes that COVID wrought, threw a wrench in all of that success. We are at about 35% office vacancy citywide, and it varies neighborhood by neighborhood, but citywide, we're at an average of over 30% retail vacancy. We are year over year seeing above, only 60% of our pre-COVID hotel occupancy. And during the daytime, we're still, and this is an uptick over the past years, we're just over 60% of our daytime foot traffic. So those are kind of the numbers of what we're dealing with. So what are we doing about it? How did we get here? San Francisco has had a downtown plan for a long time. In 1985, we created one of the early mixed-use downtown general plan focuses, where we looked at how do we concentrate office growth and other kinds of growth downtown so that we can preserve the character of the rest of our neighborhoods throughout the city. That 1985 downtown plan was focused mostly on office growth, not on residential growth. We did tweak it over the years since 1985. We built on top of it with a number of redevelopment plans that added some residential, but it still left our downtown largely office focused, both by design, by those plans, and by economy. Frankly, the value, while we are a boom and bust city for sure, the value created in the bus cycles meant that office was the highest and best user, and they could pay a lot more for that space than any other user could and would. And that left us with a downtown that was largely office focused and was, I would dare say, far more vulnerable than Denver and Portland, even when COVID hit and changed all of those. And I'll try to go through this quickly so we can get to Denver and then ask questions. But the way we've attacked it, I think it took us probably through most of 2022 before everyone was willing to admit that the world had changed for good, that it wasn't a temporal thing that we were going to be heading back to in San Francisco, and we were just going to get back to our earlier success and the buildings were going to fill back up again. In early 2023, we released a document called The Roadmap for San Francisco's Future. That document was, what it says. It's not a plan, it is a roadmap. And the principles of the roadmap are, I think, the same principles that all of the cities we'll talk about today are following. We need to make sure downtown is clean and safe. We need to facilitate new uses and flexibility in buildings. We need to make it easier to start and grow a business, especially small businesses. We need more arts, culture, and nightlife downtown. We need better public spaces downtown, and we need to make sure we maintain transportation downtown. I dare to say that any of the plans we'll talk about today, any of the work any of our cities are doing are, pretty agreed upon on those basic roadmap strategies, but we had to put them down because they weren't the principles of our 1985 downtown plan that we hadn't changed much since. And we needed to affirmatively make those changes and say those things. In late 2023, mid to late 2023, which is also when I came on board into my current role as Executive Director of Economic Development, we began implementation of what I call Phase 0. Affectionately, we like to call it our throwing spaghetti at the wall period, because it really was about, as we're understanding that San Francisco is undergoing this long-term transition, we're still not sure what the endpoint is. And so a lot of the strategies we're testing. We're not sure what the best way is to get our arts and culture downtown. What's going to work? What do people want to do? So we did that in kind of three ways. One, we just instituted a whole lot of programs. We started having a lot of night markets, activations, parties, First Thursdays, outdoor events downtown to just try to see, will people come downtown and what do they want to do when they get there, and can it be sticky? Will they come down for an outdoor party and will they stay and go to bars and restaurants? We tried a whole lot of strategies to re-tenant our ground floor. We have two of the programs that I think were really successful there. We had a storefront opportunity grant program where we gave folks between $25,000 and $50,000. If they started up shop in a vacant storefront, they could use that money for whatever, tenant improvements, et cetera, but it was an incentive to go in a ground floor storefront. We had another program that's gotten a lot of media success called Vacant to Vibrant, where we gave them less money, but we actually partnered with landlords. We went out and recruited. Months of free rent turn into paying tenants after their free rent time was over. We tried a whole lot of arts and culture programs. We had a program called SF Live, where we had outdoor music in public spaces throughout the fall, summer, and spring. We had a grant program we called Energy, where we gave bars, restaurants, and folks who had the opportunity to host live music or other types of entertainment a grant to activate their retail business to provide more entertainment rather than just food and beverage, F&B. That also was incredibly successful. It went like that, and we're going to do that again. And then we piloted something called entertainment zones. That required state law, where we were allowed to open streets where we've got bars and restaurants to outdoor drinking. And that can be hosted at any point in time. those have been incredibly successful. We started with one last fall, and I think we're at 13 and counting. Every neighborhood wants an entertainment zone, and everybody wants to throw these parties. So a whole lot of stuff that we were just trying. Those are the successful ones. There were some things that weren't as successful that I won't go into, but a lot of those were, and then there were a couple other programs we tried. One was focusing on new users. We created a kind of mini plan called 30 by 30, which was aimed at getting 30,000 new residents and students here in San Francisco by 2030. I'm still hopeful we might pull it off. That was really looking at what can we do in terms of zoning, in terms of building code to stimulate conversions of office buildings to residential. What kind of actual subsidy can we give to them? And there's some lessons learned about those as well. And how can we aim at getting more students and more university presence downtown? And that third one has been pretty hard. That's one of those we've thrown at the wall that we haven't had a whole lot of stickiness, and we can talk more about that. The third effort, in addition to programs and new users, was really focusing on our visitor center. We created a plan called HEART, which was hospitality, entertainment, art, retail, and tourism, really focused on our Union Square and Yerba Buena districts, two neighborhoods straddling our main core of Market Street, focused on tourism. One often on visitor tourism for shopping, and the other on business tourism, conventions, et cetera. We've been hit really hard in the tourism sector. And so we've had a focused effort of what do we do to get more people coming back to those areas? Some of the things we tried there, we are flooding the area with liquor licenses so that we can make it easy to open new bars and restaurants, mostly restaurants, right? It's their type 47 licenses. We flooded the area with ambassadors, which is our community safety program that works alongside our police department to make sure we've got people day in and out that make people feel safe moving around. We've experimented with a lot of night lighting and murals. And the one that has really proved successful, and we're just in the early days of it, is our main park of Union Square Plaza, right in front of our Macy's building in our downtown shopping core. We now have activated on a daily basis by the same marquee firm, Biederman Redevelopment Ventures, that does Bryant Park in New York. So there's something happening there every day that somebody wants to go and do. So that's a whole bucket of stuff that we've just tried over the last year and a half. I think what maybe to close out what our note is, we are now entering what I call phase one, if that was phase zero. We have a new mayor in place, Mayor Daniel Lurie, who is really focused on understanding how do we execute that change over the long term. We've tried stuff. We have a good sense of what works. We have a good sense of what the people of San Francisco want to do downtown and what might be successful. And so now we can move into a phase one where hopefully we're creating the sustainable mechanisms that will allow us to implement strategies over the long term. What does that mean? That probably means having a long-term 20-year public realm plan, that we have a capital plan to back up and institute. It means that the mayor has set up something he's calling the Partnership for San Francisco, modeled off the Partnership for New York, where our business community is an active partner day to day in the revitalization of downtown. It means, and this is me with a little bit of wishful thinking, but I think we'll get there. It means that we commit tax increment or some other form of sustained public financing over the long term so that we can continue that investment over the next 20 years, not just a one-off investment. And hopefully it means we're setting up a downtown authority that can take advantage of that tax increment and combine that with private capital to, again, make the changes we need over the long term to move from an office-centric downtown to a diverse 24-hour mixed-use downtown. So with that, maybe I'll turn it over. Is that a good place to stop?
Thank you, Sarah. I've been asked to make a slight adjustment in the program and to give our council members an opportunity to ask a question of each of the speakers. So I open it up to either one of you to do that. I think you just need to put it up against your, just talk.
Okay. Oh, okay. Hi, Sarah. My name's Olivia Clark. I'm a city councilor in Portland. I really appreciate your presentation, especially the spaghetti part. I think we're sort of at the spaghetti, although we've tried a lot of the things that you mentioned, the lighting, the plazas, activating the downtown. But I have a kind of a different question. You said you have a new mayor. I'm sorry I don't follow your politics as closely as I probably should. But did you have as you were developing the spaghetti approach, do you have a champion or any particular person, a charismatic person that led part of this for you, or was it just a team effort?
I will say, yeah, that's a hard question. Thank you, Councilmember. There were a number of champions, and I think it depends on the issues. We have an incredibly vibrant arts community that in terms on the live music and entertainment side, that we're champions for entertainment zones, outdoor music, parties, that really helped us drive those forward. For all of the changes, another big champion is we have a very strong community benefit district portfolio here in San Francisco. We have no less than 5 downtown CBDs of the 5 neighborhoods that I noted. And not only were they champions for this work, who then had their own stakeholders who were their payers into their CBDs, but who banded together to speak with a common voice for the changes that we were making downtown. So they acted, almost as one meta CBD, even as they acted their own independent CBDs. And then, of course, Mayor Breed, now followed by Mayor Lurie, the mayoral leadership has meant a lot. It is really what is driving this work. And then the last I'll add, especially as your council members, is we are seeing this year, in terms of loud and proud partners, our board of supervisors who oversee these districts being bigger partners. We had some transitions in the elections last fall. Our 3 board of supervisor members, our equivalent of council members that serve downtown, are all 3 very loudly pro-change, pro-business, pro-activity downtown, and often speak with one voice, even as they represent their individual communities. And that, I think, I want to kind of focus on at the end point, just because that is different than what we've had in previous years. That is a new thing this year. I think the voters wanted it, which is why those 3 are in the positions they're in, representing those parts of downtown. And I think it is going to drive our work even further.
Hi, this is Steve Novick, also in the City Council. I have 2 questions, one of which will sound ridiculous, but I'm deadly serious, and the other one is obviously serious. And the first one is, I have an outdoor music event in mind, which is to gather a huge crowd to march through downtown singing the Petula Clark song, Downtown. Let's go downtown, where all the lights are bright, downtown, waiting for you tonight, downtown, you're going to be all right now. And I found out that Petula Clark is actually still alive. She lives in Switzerland for the skiing. And I was wondering if you think San Francisco would be willing to join us in extending an invitation to Petula Clark to do that event with us in both cities.
I will absolutely speak to the mayor.
The second is on the concept of converting downtown office space to residential. This is something that I've been meaning to ask the council president to convene a session where we just hear from people about the viability of that idea. And I'm just wondering what you've learned about the viability of that idea in another earthquake zone.
Ironically, seismic challenges are not our biggest problem. I mean, in some ways, it's interesting you raised the earthquake zone part. We are undergoing a pretty active program to encourage owners of non-ductile, stone buildings that are most vulnerable downtown to retrofit those. Actually, one of the best ways we have to get them to do so is if they're going to make some active investment towards a conversion. So there's actually some natural pairing there of buildings going from office to residential and creating a more sustainable building for the long term. So that's the upside, and we're the downside is they're really, really hard. I mean, once you even get past the physical hardships, right? Not every building has the right window to wall ratio that even creates an optimal depth. Not every building has the right kind of exposure to light to allow a high number of units. Not every building has the right number of staircases or has the core in the right location. Then you get to the cost changes. And while every building is different in terms of the change it needs, we've talked about throwing things at the wall. I mean, our downtown adaptive reuse program has had 4 stages. One was just, let's make sure we get all the zoning and building code hurdles that we can out of the way. Let's make sure they don't have open space requirements, because of course an office building can't create no open space, all those things. That didn't do much. We with voter support adopted Proposition C in March 2024, where we waived our transfer tax for all conversion projects. That was another stimulus we put on. That didn't do much. This November, we flat out waived inclusionary and impact fee requirements, which are pretty hefty in San Francisco. So we took all those city cost burdens off of it, which is a good one. We still don't have a conversion. We have one filed. And so we have a 4th tool that we are putting into place that should be in effect by summer to early fall, where we are going to, a state bill was put in place that will allow us to take our local share of property tax increment and let it plow back into the building. So while that won't be a complete property tax waiver for buildings, they will still have to pay roughly half the state share of that property tax. The remainder that would have gone to the city will go back to the building to kind of create one more financing tool to make it sustainable. I'm hopeful that will do it, but we don't know.
Is this working? Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. I'm really interested to hear that you've used all those tools, things that we've been thinking about, and really haven't seen a benefit from reductions or removals or whatever. What do you attribute that to? You know, we talk a lot about our reputational damage and our inability to attract capital back to build. What do you attribute that to in your case?
There's a number of factors. I mean, one is time, right? Like, you know, speaking as a former developer for my life at Tishman Speyer, until I see that property tax reduction on the books, I can't go to an investor and claim all of the tools to even secure a piece of land to execute on. So there's a timing factor. But to be real, it's not timing alone as well. I mean, San Francisco right now doesn't have much residential development going on at all. It's not just conversions, right? Our rental rates, and they are picking up, but our rents are not at the level they were with the increase in construction costs to make development at any scale really pencil. I think we're going to see that change a little bit. I think we're going to see, well, to be fair, the tariffs and the cost on some of our steel may change my factor. So let's asterisk that. But I think we are seeing rents increase. We are seeing the availability of equity towards residential projects increase. So I think it's going to get better, but it's not going to be a quick pickup.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. And I think now we'll move to Andrew.
Yeah, great. I was so tempted to jump in on some of those answers. It was like, oh my gosh, these are so relevant to what we have going on too. So so glad to go back to those questions too, if you want, after the introduction here. I also really appreciate the opportunity to come in and have this kind of shared learning experience. We facilitate a program every year called Urban Exploration. We've actually been to Portland twice in an attempt to learn about all the great things that you're doing. The last one is in 2017, huge mobility focus for us. And what I've learned from facilitating these types of programs over the last 6 years here at the partnership is that for us, for what happens, what we bring back, it's not often like the thing, just like you said, Steve, in the intro. It's not often like, oh, we're going to take this and just do that here and it'll work just the same. It's really learning more about, you know, who's involved, what financing mechanisms were there, what did the public think about it, how were you thinking about, you know, which things to do first, how to phase these actions, whether they're policies or projects. And so, yeah, I think I think these are the coolest opportunities to really collaborate with everyone. So appreciate the opportunity. Again, my name is Andrew Iltis. I lead our urban planning, urban design, mobility, and research here at the Downtown Denver Partnership. I'm going to talk a little bit. What I'm going to do is actually give you a bit more of kind of Denver's history, because it really does kind of then give you a more of a background of who we are at the Downtown Denver Partnership, which then I think really is important for understanding our role in where we are today, because we really do have kind of that voice that you were just talking about, Sarah, that business voice at the table. We have people in the mayor's office almost every day having these conversations about how to bring downtown back, what is the action that's needed next, how to bring funding to the table from the private community, how do we put together these projects. And so I think there's something to be learned there about, what our organization is and kind of where that influence has kind of come from and grown from over the last decades. So just, quickly, obviously, Denver has a long history going back. Indigenous people came, they found the confluence of the Cherry Creek and Platte to be really important, great place. Settlers recognized that as also a geographic place. The Arapaho, Ute, and Cheyenne were really the tribes that called our city home first for centuries before. The white settlement began in the 17th century, 18th century, around the establishment of rail in Denver, a lot of commercial land use agglomeration in really a tight 2 square mile geographic center, urban center. In the 1920s, we really grew around what are called streetcar suburbs, and that really kind of expanded the city's footprint, not downtown's footprint necessarily, but really the city kind of stretched out to create these really nice residential and commercial enclaves. And that's important in our current story now. So I mentioned that particularly. And that was, again, kind of stretching out 3 or 4 miles from the urban center. In the 1950s and 70s, big suburban flight out of downtown, big decline, urban renewal. We made the decision then to scrape 26 blocks of downtown. We have about 120 blocks now. 26 of that, almost more than a third of it was really cleared and was parking lot for a long time while we waited for modern commercial development to really pick up. Of course, that was spurred by the 1980s with an oil boom in the Mountain West, and banking as well. Financial institutions finding a place. And so a lot of our urban fabric, if you look at downtown, if you've been here in a while, downtown Denver, there's a very distinct line where that urban renewal area stopped, kind of preserving the historic character of the warehousing and all of the things from that, turn of the century development, what we call lower downtown, kind of our historic district, and the, upper downtown, our central district, central business district, commercial core. It's very distinct. And that distinct line has played now to be a real challenge in our urban design as the impacts of the pandemic play out. Going a little bit again, 1990s, we had new airport, we have transit growing with our light rail system. Again, learning from Portland and all the great things about how to bring light rail into a city, how to create light rail communities. Urban investment in things like entertainment. We were able to consolidate a lot of our stadiums downtown, and that played a big role in what would begin the era of really neighborhood growth in downtown. In the 2000s, between 2007 and 2019, we grew from a downtown with about 6,000 residential units to now we have 35,000 residential units. Depending on where you draw those lines in the downtown. So huge residential boom in just the last, 2 or 3 decades. Along with that also came, big urban development in Denver Union Station. We play a key role in taking all of the tech companies that can't afford to be in San Francisco. The next place they look is Denver. And actually, prior to the pandemic, the affordability of Denver really played, that was really played into our hand well. We noticed so many people. We were seeing our population growth really be attributed to those higher expensive markets on the coast, and those tech entrepreneurs that are looking to start a company, but just didn't have enough to go right into the meat of the tech sector in places like San Francisco, Silicon Valley, and a lot of people looking for livability, and probably the same thing that you were experiencing with Portland for a long time, where people would move here first and then look for a job, and we touted that as something that was attracting people for a long time. All of that really plays into where the Downtown Denver Partnership came about. So in that 1950s, 60s era of urban renewal, we had a group of business owners that were fed up with this suburban flight. They said, we can provide really high quality urban experiences in our downtown. It's not just about economic investment straight into commercial. It's also about creating places that people are interested to be. And so that really is what sponsored our first, our transit mall, the first move at the transit mall. Of course, 16th Street, that then spurred our business improvement district, which started kind of isolated around 16th, but then grew to involve the whole 120 blocks. The Downtown Denver Partnership, which turned from an LLC of business leaders, turned into a membership organization. Now we have 550 corporate members in our organization. And this, now we're, 65, 70 years old as an organization in downtown. And so that relationship between the city and our role as an advocate, as an activist, as a partner, maybe even as a financing partner, has really been grown over a long period of time with lots of experiences, shared experiences in bringing together kind of mixed use districts and delivering big projects and bringing the business community along while we, grow into a more multimodal city. So that's really key to our role in downtown. Getting into the pandemic a little bit, all of the things that Sarah said and all the things that you were talking about in Portland as well, we've tried all those too. And of course, the first big move was clean, safe. The second move was activation, retail. We also had a pop-up retail program. The thing that's happening that I think is kind of unique, we had the 16th Street Mall had run the course of its useful life. And in, for 13 years, we'd been talking about a reconstruction project on 16th Street Mall, financed through, various things. That our TIF was, we exhausted our TIF on 16th Street. It had federal money in it, had city money in it, city bond issued. All of those things came together to create a $175 million project that kicked off the very perfect time of 2019. In April of 2020 is when we really started to get those shovels in the ground, and the timing couldn't have been worse to have a mile-long corridor of our downtown be completely ripped up, because what that did then was it taught all those people that were maybe a little bit hesitant, over from 2020 to 2023 and even today, all those people that were hesitant about coming downtown for various reasons, access and missing this urban space that are really the heart of our downtown core was gone, or it was fenced off and shovels in the ground. And that's really been one of our crux issues. That I think that's created such a lag in our action plan, because we didn't have even the urban place or the transportation infrastructure to even convince people that it was downtown was on the recovery mode. We the second we would say recovery, we would tear up another block of 16th Street in front of their office building, giving them another reason why it's hard to be downtown. It feels scary. There's not as much foot traffic. So that's a little bit of a unique thing that I think is interesting. And of course, that has impacts on your businesses. Once you have that foot traffic, we really started to see ourselves in that doom loop. So with the activation, with the retail, some of that stuff was successful. not as successful as I would say that, Sarah was talking about. With those retail programs, we try to stick them in our traditional, hot spot of retail activity on 16th Street. With all those construction impacts, it just wasn't a fair chance. And a lot of those pop-up programs really struggled. Now we've pivoted since then and as the Downtown Denver Partnership, are now leveraged by the city's economic development organization to help distribute grants and to do a lot of that face-to-face, one-on-one business assistance and advocacy and marketing that the city just doesn't have the capacity to do. So we have become a programming partner in that way. And that is where one of the questions that I think is coming is about federal money. That really is where the city has channeled a lot of their economic development funds in through ARPA or provided by ARPA through the city's program into our organization to help facilitate, issuing those grants, helping with those business incentives. And now, as we see some of these blocks, we are about halfway done through the project. We'll be 10 blocks in of the 12 blocks by May. We will be able to, we have more of those incentives coming out, and we're working very closely with the mayor's office on tenanting. The other thing that sort of kicked up, so, our role again as an advocate, as partner, is we said our last area plan was in 2007. We actually have a little bit, it's interesting. We have a long history of planning in Denver, going back to '83 when we had some big framework moves that changed things around, really talked about 16th Street. 2007, we talked about these vision elements of green, walkable, prosperous, livable, diverse. Those elements really still applied to today. All those things were about bringing more neighborhood character to downtown. And so when we started talking about, gosh, we really need a new strategy, a new direction for what downtown is going to be, we said, we don't need to rethink the vision. We know that we want downtown to be safe. We also want it to be beautiful. We know we want downtown to be economically thriving. We now want it to be even better for new businesses to open up and for companies to feel like they can bring their employees back into the downtown core. We know we want it to be an entertainment district, but we want it to be the best cultural center of the region of the state. So bringing in kind of a little bit of that sharpened focus in a new plan, which we kicked off last fall. We are a 50-50 funding partner with the city. It's $1 million plan, so it's significant resources that we brought forward as a funding partner to this planning process. And we said, we don't want your typical neighborhood plan, which takes 3 years. We need to get this thing done in 6 months. And so we are now about 2/3 of the way through that plan. And I'll be happy to talk more about kind of where we're headed with that. But I'll just, at a high level, what we're discovering is, yes, all the things about the significance of downtown, the importance are real. Downtown serves as such an economic base for the entire city, 1.8% of the total geographic area, and yet 20% of the total lodging and retail tax, 20% of the overall land property tax are coming from this really tiny little geographic area. So that is key. That discovering those things through this planning process has been really key to kind of get to Councilmember Clark's question about, what did you do to get people to move? A lot of it has been identifying those real significant financial and economic functions of downtown Denver within our greater context. The other thing is we have a lot of momentum. 16th Street Mall is an example. That was something that we had started a long time ago. Now we're opening up new blocks. We can play off that momentum. We also have we have significant development that's happening just on the edges of the traditional downtown core that will always shift our center of gravity. We have 50 acres around a Kroenke-owned site, Ball Arena, which is our Nuggets Avalanche area. That is going to break ground in the fall or in the quarter 4 of 26. That'll be a huge opportunity for new growth. It's also a risk to our traditional commercial core. we have this huge office vacancy problem, and I'm glad we got into the adaptive reuse thing. We've had the exact same experience. One thing that we did prior to this planning process, and this gets to kind of like the thing that we're going to lean on in going forward, is that adaptive reuse process exposed a huge gap, a financial gap for development in downtown Denver, just as in San Francisco, and I'm sure just as in Portland. We noticed that these developers are experiencing, and those financial stacks are missing anywhere from 10 to $40 million to put these projects together for the scale of what we're talking about in downtown. And of course, that lends all the things that you talked about. Constructability is a key, but so many other reasons. And as we were going through that process, so the Downtown Partnership actually created a task force to look into it, to identify what those funding gaps were, to really lead kind of from the business community side. We also had the city there as a partner. They have a pilot. They have 3 projects in the pipeline, adaptive reuse projects. They aren't huge and they haven't been built yet, but they are working through their permit review process. But what we identified was that there isn't a whole lot of flexibility in our tax code, our tax system here, whether at the state level or the city, and not a lot of appetite to go through abatement and these other things that typically work, historic preservation dollars, all those things. We just don't have a lot of that available to us here in Denver. And as we looked around, we noticed that there was this development authority sitting on Denver Union Station, which had been a $400 million public investment that generated $400 billion of investment. They thought it was going to build out over 30 years. It built out over 15. And the development authority that they had established there was still sitting there. And there was an opportunity to let it go, to sunset that, or to extend it. So that was the first move we had to get the voters to approve to do. So that all happened with the city's support, obviously. It was extended. So now we had another 15 years. But to apply it to the rest of downtown, we had to, vote that in as well. The city was very clever and said, we're going to use public right-of-way as the property to extend that district out to the rest of the city. And then we can, or to the rest of downtown, and then we can opt those properties in on a case-by-case basis. We can apply them into the process through council, through a council process. And so that's kind of where we're at with our DDA, is we actually have a $550 million ESC and has an opportunity to grow as we see more property investment, real TIF that's sitting there, and we are getting applications. We, the partnership, are not facilitating that process. The city made an interesting choice to keep that all very close within the city process, which, from our perspective, I'm going to be honest, I'm not speaking to people from Denver, I'm speaking to people from other cities. I'll say what we learned from other cities in our exploration about how to do DDAs, how to do district financing, is it's nice to be once removed from those funds. And we looked at Calgary really closely in this, and I hope you look at Calgary too in your exploration. And one, they're touted as like this poster child for adaptive reuse. That's great. They've got some good opportunity there. They've had some huge council investment in that. But I would say what's more interesting about Calgary is how they leverage their development corporation, the Calgary Municipal Land Corporation, CMLC, to activate on those TIF dollars to bring about major development, to bring about catalytic projects, whether it's from their arts complex, their library, their river, doing revitalization, bringing out East Village. That's given them a lot of flexibility and a lot of speed, ultimately, to kind of get through the sludge of a bureaucratic process, to allow them to market, do things like activation on sites that cities aren't really programmed to do. We see ourselves in some of that space, but we aren't totally tuned up to be a developer. And so, I think that's something where we're probably going to try to head in. That's one of the key recommendations coming out of the area plan process, among other things, of like investing on the edges where we have some of these residual gaps in our urban infrastructure. Again, that urban renewal, it built out a lot of the commercial core, but we're still sitting on 30 acres of surface parking lot, these parking craters that really keep the downtown disconnected from our near-in neighborhoods where we have a ton of density, but they just aren't making the trip across those gaps to come shop, stay, hang out downtown. And so, in addition to that urban fabric, we're also seeing the process at how we apply these tools and how we create almost a master planning approach to these projects is going to be really important so that we can take advantage of timing, take advantage of, that private capital, that private development mindset. So that's where I'll stop, but happy to go into more detail on any of those things.
So again, we're going to turn to council to ask a couple questions, and then we'll go to the opening.
Is this on? Yes. Andrew, thank you so much. That was a lot to absorb.
Yeah, sorry.
I've been on 16th Street, and I in the last 10 years or so, and really enjoyed it. It was vibrant. It was fun. I still have pictures from just hanging out. It was really a great project, and I look forward to seeing what you've been able to do to revitalize that area. But the last thing you said was about parking lots, and that's what I wanted to ask about. I'm just assuming that as a Western city, that you've got a lot of parking lots sitting around, and we do too. And we're thinking about how you either land bank them or redevelop them, and I wonder what your thinking is about redeveloping all the parking lots, not just the ones that you identified.
Yeah. Yes, and it's as we start to go down and really focus on parking lots, the challenges are becoming more apparent, but the opportunities are too. And some of the ideas that we're talking about, and these haven't been fully fleshed out, so big caveat on big asterisks there, and we can totally follow up on how this plays if they go through our planning process. Is the big idea is, can we actually create a blight tax? There are cities that do this, that would disincentivize those landowners from sitting on them. We have some conditions where we have the same landowner who owns, a third of them. It's about relationships with them mostly. So I don't necessarily want to go in hard on a blight tax, because we feel like we're starting to make some progress with them on a couple of these properties. So we want to be a little bit careful about how we go in too hard with the disincentives. The second piece is the incentives, the other side of it, right? We've got this DDA funding. I think we're working closely with, and this gets a little tricky, right? Because you can't pick favorites necessarily. You don't want to say, this is a high priority area, and so you're, an obvious choice for this funding. And yet we know that we need to be catalytic in how we deliver these projects from a public perspective and a private perspective. So the geography of it is really important. I don't think we have enough capacity to think about all of them all at once, except, with the exception of doing kind of a blanket policy like I talked about. And then the last thing is rezoning. We have some fairly significant affordable housing policies that have come into effect in the last 4 years. What those did in some neighborhoods was actually create an incentive for developers to get their projects out of the ground before. This is unfortunate, because now we have this huge delivery of all these projects that don't have these kind of affordability measures in them. That said, it was a bit of a stimulus for neighborhoods just to the south of us, Golden Triangle, a creative district. They saw an increase of 5,000 units in the last 3 years. And so I think there are some zoning tools that could be used to incentivize some of these things, but I think at this point we're really on a case-by-case basis, unless we really decide that we can run the risk of just going all in on a policy. And there's probably, it doesn't have to be so stark. It might be something that we can inch at and find some of those little disincentives to start to get the low-hanging fruit at least moving.
Thank you.
And Steve Novick, City Council. Thank you for talking about Calgary, because I knew vaguely that Calgary was a champion of adaptive reuse, and I appreciate your saying that we should look into that and telling some of the nuance. I wanted to ask you and Sarah the obvious question, which is, do you have a significant unsheltered homelessness issue downtown? And what are your thoughts about addressing that? But also I have another question just for Andrew, which is, how long do you think Nikola Jokic has to keep on doing what he does before he takes his rightful place in the GOAT conversation?
Yeah, 60 points, come on. I'll start on the house conversation. So we also had a mayoral change, an administration change in recent years. Our mayor has now been there for about a year and a couple months. Mike Johnston, and his predecessor had really only focused on kind of the immediate organizational collaboration from the district attorney, to our, private security on our place management, or from our place management perspective, and hadn't really made any big moves. And we were seeing, along with the migrant crisis, we're starting to see some fairly significant population and encampment growth in our downtown area. And he came in, really ran on a platform and then came in, and within a year had adapted and developed this program called House 1000, where they were able to, get 1,300 people off the streets, really focusing on kind of those more densely populated encampment areas in downtown. And we haven't seen that come back since that program kind of, I think there's still some pieces of it that are moving, but it was very successful very quickly. And then, and then we've kind of filled in with the activation, the typical clean and safe things. You'll still hear, though, from the neighborhoods that there's been a change in the last 4 years, and that there's still more that needs to be done around mental health. Really, making sure that the population that's there, we notice it's the same 30 people, and they're really hard cases that, they're in and out of service, and so we've actually developed a program that's been really successful, where we have 2 people that are working on, establishing contact, making their way around through all of that population, and helping to get those people into service.
And on the San Francisco end, yes, of course, but I also, our downtown neighborhoods that I spoke of are not bearing the brunt of the problem. Honestly, the attention that both the city teams and the our CBD partners, who also have cleaning programs and in some cases safety ambassadors, has made it less so than in other neighborhoods like our Tenderloin neighborhood or our Mission neighborhood, which are both close to downtown. Our new mayor, Mayor Lurie, is really focused on this. He's committed to building 1,500 shelter beds in the next, is it 100 days? It's a really tight timeline. He is super focused on it. And we are actually piloting a neighborhood strategy that will start with 2 teams focused, one on the Tenderloin, one on the Mission, and then a 3rd team focused on the rest of the city. So that kind of shows where our problems are. That said, in our downtown neighborhoods, while it's less specifically a visible homeless problem, our mental health and drug addiction issues do spill over, and that's where the ambassadors really come in. So, and that's where our street teams, trying to get them into service, to come into place. It's just something we need to be vigilant on, because the second we take our the second we remove a couple ambassadors or take our eyes off the pressure, obviously, we have street challenges again, which make those places really less welcoming, not just for residents and workers, but for visitors, which is our biggest problem.
Okay, thanks. I think we're ready to move to members' questions now. We expect to have time for about 3 to 5 audience questions. And for these questions, please come to the mic and ask your question in 30 seconds. We're not looking for statements or commentary, just a sentence that ends in a question mark, please.
Hi, Chris Smith, City Club member. Andrew mentioned light rail, and this is not an original observation on my part. I'll credit Jarrett Walker, the transit planner. we have spent 50 years investing in a high-capacity transit system whose first use is to deliver people to downtown jobs. There's a lot less leverage from that function right now. Do you have a similar situation, and how have you adapted your transit system to deal with the new reality?
Great question, observation. I wish I had a better answer to this. And a lot of the challenge is that just as you mentioned, our transit system was designed for commuters. We have so few commuters using transit. In 2019 we had 39% transit mode shift, and we now have 15. And a lot of that was riding light rail. Now light rail is one of the worst performing of the vehicle types for RTD, and so I don't think we have a great answer there because our return to office has been such a lag. RTD there's some state policy, state legislature that's going through right now around more punishment for violence against drivers, as well as some oversight. RTD is a huge district that serves a lot of suburban communities, and so we're trying to figure out how to keep downtown a real focus. Some of the highest performing rail, or transit services serve downtown and just aren't functioning at all right now. We're also, in the meantime, delivering our first bus rapid transit line. And of course, all of that anxiety and questioning that you just mentioned about, the use of transit, how is it going to serve? That's of course layered onto this project while it impacts businesses and all these things. So it's kind of a tenuous moment for us here in Denver and transit, I would say.
And I'll just note it's probably, well, I can't order of magnitude it, not knowing Denver's problem, but similar in San Francisco. We knew this was coming, and now we're hitting it. We have a really dramatic fiscal cliff that we are hitting over the next year and a half to 2 years on our local San Francisco sponsored Muni system, which is both light rail within the city and buses, including bus rapid transit, and BART, which is our regional rail system that really delivers people from all over the Bay Area to downtown San Francisco. Muni ridership is actually not fully recovered, but it is doing very well, and people are feeling very happy. Our customer service response for Muni MTA is great, and yet the ridership that is recovering is nowhere near enough fare recovery to even bolster the fiscal cliff that we're touching. So we're gonna, for it to even survive, there are some pretty dramatic funding measures, tax measures that we'll be looking at on the ballot in the next year and a half. BART's even worse, and it's a huge concern. I think we're all concerned because what makes downtowns downtown is access. And if we lose that access, it's just another dense neighborhood.
Hi, I'm Jenny Breed, a resident of Portland. My question for either one of you has to do with adaptive reuse solutions, and I'm actually curious about things that go beyond economy, things that go beyond practicality, such as retrofitting, and perhaps issues of cultural attitude in general, that maybe individualizing development and dealing with historic preservation is too much work, it's too complicated, too individualization, too much to think about. And are there solutions you might have on an anthropological level, on an attitude level, toward combating that perception?
That's, from the San Francisco side, it's super interesting, your question, because I don't think we have that attitude or cultural problem. Honestly, there is an incredibly strong cohort of developers that have been pushing for the changes that we've made, because there are a lot of people that want to take advantage of it. And in our case, in some part because of tax credits for historic buildings, they actually see that as a benefit. We actually had 2 entitled conversions until a couple of weeks ago. And one of those entitled conversions was relying on historic tax credits and was in our historic Warfields. It's an old entertainment building that they were going to convert. So that was actually an asset in that building, which is really interesting. Now, that building recently, because it was the developer lost didn't have financing and couldn't hold on to it anymore. It has a success story there. The building was actually purchased by a nonprofit that supports artists, where they are turning it into a combination of permanent space for arts organizations, for offices with residents above. So it'll still be something great, but it's just, while that one didn't work out exactly, in that case, it was an asset, not a challenge.
Yeah, and I guess I would just, our uniqueness in all of that is we had such a terrible run with urban renewal that we lost so many of our beautiful historic assets that I think culturally we feel like, you know, anything that's left that has that quality is really important to preserve. So it's almost not even a question of that. It's the buildings that are you know, 1970s, 1980s, large floor plates that people don't see them really reflecting the historic value and the cultural value that I think people are sort of blaming for, you know, some of the issues. And those are the ones that are hardest to convert. Those are the ones that are hardest to attract, you know, tenants. So yeah, it's a little bit different. The area that's doing really well is our lower downtown area. The retail's better there. The office vacancy is lower there. That character, their ability to attract new tech tenants, you know, is still there because I think it's a little bit more precious in this city.
Hi, I'm Tom Dyke, a City Club member and a recovering seismic resilience junkie. I have a question for any of the folks here, but particularly for Steve Novick and Olivia Clark. What opportunities do you see in the current situation for improving Portland's seismic resilience?
So I don't have a good answer. I still have people beating me up for trying to force unreinforced masonry building retrofits 10 years ago. So once I get over PTSD over that, I will try to have a better answer to your question.
I have my go bag packed. I live in a subduction zone. And I know this has become a much more visible issue because of the CEI hub in Linton, which we are going to be putting some FEMA resources into looking at, but I don't have a good answer for you. Thank you.
Hello. Can you hear me? Okay, yeah. Hi, my name is Alexis. I'm a senior at Portland State University, and I'm currently writing an undergraduate thesis on how arts and culture is being used in relation to state and local governments as a way to really like revitalize and activate downtown. It's kind of a buzzword at this point, but and I just wanted to hear from Sarah specifically like how San Francisco's been using those things, and especially in relation to the challenges that you face with regards to zoning.
Can I, maybe before he goes away from the microphone, can you give a little more color on the zoning challenges you're projecting? Because I'm not sure I know.
Well, as I understand it, like zoning for cultural spaces has been somewhat more difficult depending on certain factors, such as redlining's involved, so is gentrification as a certain factor, and like trying to find ways to alleviate that in the current climate.
Thank you. Okay, that's helpful. I think to clarify, I don't think zoning is a burden for those. It's not an issue of, well, the planning could let you do it here in most cases. It may be a cost pressure issue, to your point about the term you used of gentrification. Look, I actually think in some ways that's the least of our issues right now. Like, there's a lot of opportunity in the position that we're facing. Buildings are 25% of what they ever were on a cost acquisition basis. Rents are not dropping 75%, but they're dropping 40 to 50, right? Like there in terms of space for arts and cultural uses, it's a really good time. And actually, the incident I gave when we were talking about conversions before, that's a case of a conversion that didn't work where an arts organization bought the building. So I think there's, depending on whether you're talking about an entertainment use or a building where arts and culture businesses can, have anchor over the long term and not face rising rents, there's just for all of that, we're probably in the best point that we've been. Which doesn't mean it's still not occasionally a challenge, but it's less of a challenge. The challenge actually that we're finding more is all these things that we're seeing as wins, how do we turn them into sustainable economic development strategies that don't require subsidies from us to keep going? Entertainment zones are great. They're fabulous. People love them. But right now we're given subsidies for every time they're open on St. Patrick's Day or whatever to create a really great event. As much money as they are making, the businesses aren't making enough that they can reinvest their own money yet back into them to run those events on their own. I think we'll get there for entertainment zones, but we aren't there yet. Outdoor community events, outdoor music, I don't know how we do that without city or philanthropic subsidy, right? So those are great cultural events, but they have come with a price tag. And we have public interest in investing in those things now, but we won't always. I mean, we have public interest because we have a problem. Once the problem goes away, it's hard to keep those going. Our grant programs, kind of the same thing. We have public interest in subsidizing them. When we have a grant program, it's going to be hard for me to fight for a budget 5 years from now if we're saying we're recovered to kind of run those events. So I think those are our bigger challenges on arts and culture. And then, the other thing I'll mention, and this, we are blessed in San Francisco with small and scrappy and medium and large scale arts institutions, everything from the ICA, which is a free Institute of Contemporary Art museum that we have located downtown that people go in and we have really awesome free shows, to MoMA, which is our, capital A arts organization. All of them are facing really hard funding challenges adjacent to what our downtown problems, like their problems. Yes, they're hit somewhat by lack of visitation and ticket fees, but honestly, for most of those institutions, ticket fees, if they charge them, never made more than 30% of their budget anyways. They have a real problem because the model that's running a lot of our arts institutions was philanthropy, and philanthropy has changed significantly. The kind of corporate commitments or family fund commitments that you could count on year over year over year to run those kind of institutions and run a lot of our arts programs has changed on its own as our culture has changed. And so that's another thing we're really watching that's going to be a coming problem.
Thank you. Last question.
Hi, my name is Heather Flint Shadow. I'm an urban planner of about almost 30 years. I'm also the executive director of the Architectural Heritage Center and a member of the City Club Committee on the Built Environment. So I really appreciate the questions that the people who came before me provided, because it really teed up what I was about to ask as well. We were talking about resilience, and you're talking about, how do we incentivize adaptive reuse of commercial to residential? And one of the things that I was particularly curious about was things like a rehabilitation tax credit. 39 other states have this tool that we don't have, that could provide some answers to the questions I think our city council members were wondering about for resilience, in terms of what are those tools that we need in the toolbox for being able to convert, to get housing, to be able to have the funding to get resilience and upgrade those URMs. So I'm curious about how you may be using those tools, if you have those in Colorado, and how California may be using those tools. But not just for commercial buildings to convert, but also for kind of a question from the earlier speaker about adaptive reuse also of residential, that we sort of are putting a lot of our eggs in one basket. So I'm curious about how do we more multifamily in existing residential as well as those commercial buildings. So can you speak to what other tools you might be using if you're using a rehab tax credit or some other tools for getting additional housing?
whittled down to being, $3 million for a project, which we found, I mean, that's not nothing, and probably would apply to, to many projects, but that at the end of the day, it wasn't aimed at addressing where we have the most significant economic challenges, and ultimately didn't pass. And so I think that's where the DDA, to kind of speak to incentives in general, I think that's where those DDA funds are really important. And Calgary is very focused on the adaptive reuse. I think the great thing about the DDA is it's pretty flexible, and so it's not just talking about converting commercial to residential. It's also talking about bringing in, maybe an arts collaborative, or creating studio space or something like that. So I think those incentives are really important right now. You really do need them in order to get these projects to come out of the ground. But I think what Sarah just said is really important about the sustainability, long-term viability of these things, and really considering how, if you're bringing in an incentive to get a project off the ground, how is that really, working across the for a longer term of economic viability in some of these conditions. And I think in most cases, those incentives really do help, and they do spur and catalyze development. But in some cases, it's hard to make it pencil over the long term.
And I can just add that, I mean, in California, we have our California Historic Rehabilitation Tax Credit, which, that gives you a credit up to 25% of your rehab expenses. It helps. It is definitely part of the financing stack for our existing building stock to move forward. It also, I mean, part of the problem is with any historic building, you need to be a certified historic structure. You need to follow the Secretary of the Interior's interior standard, guidelines. So there are certain things that the city usually layers on top that you need to. So I would say that, for the 20% of credit that you get, maybe 10% of it might be absorbed in costs that are unique to that building because of its historic nature. So it's not all net out as a financing tool. It helps.
Well, thank you, Sarah. That brings us to the end of today's program. Thanks. Thanks to Andrew, Sarah, and Olivia, and Steve Novick for a dynamic discussion, I might say, and to Steve Dotterer for your expert moderation. I loved your comments about taking ideas from elsewhere and adapting them to suit Portland in our history. It's a very good lesson to be repeated, I think. We thank our season sponsors, AARP Oregon and Neil Kelly Company and Fight Against Sex Trafficking, and our series sponsors, CityCast Portland and Healthcare for All Oregon, and for their sponsorship. And thank you for each of you for spending time with us today. City Club plans 2 more noon panels, as I mentioned, on the future of Portland, which will be held on the first Friday of May and June, all right here at University Place. Our May the 2nd panel will continue the theme of reviving downtown Portland as a step towards reviving the entire city. Our June program will feature communities of color and their visions for Portland. We hope to see you again. And remember to join City Club today using the $40 off discount. Use the code NEW40. Thank you again for our panelists and for all of you for joining us. Thank you so much.